and we want to dive into AI and machine learning specifically being adopted across the energy sector. And Carol from 1898 and Co., I want to turn to you first for this section.
Sure.
In your experience and the clients you work with, can you speak to what maybe the most prominent barriers are to wider adoption of AI and machine learning tools in today's energy sector?
Absolutely. So, and we all touched upon it and said it and kind of danced around it, right? But it's because it is a 4-letter word, right? It's data. See how I did that? But data quality and data availability, right? So Kevin talked about the models and we, as a data scientist, we love those models, right? That's the fun part. But the not so fun part is the cleansing of the data. Kevin's shaking his head because 80%, right, of our time. I mean, they told us that in school and we're like, oh yeah, no, I'm going to do those fancy models. But it's the data quality. I always tell my students, so I teach part-time as well, but it's the 5 V's. So we go back to the 5 V's of data, the velocity. So we've talked about it, the speed at which it comes in. You have to understand that, right? The volume, the amount of data. So do I have enough data of good quality coming in to answer the questions that the business is asking? The other one, the value of the data. The variety. So am I just looking at the same thing? But I have a lot of the same thing. But what's the variety of data? Because you're going to need a lot of different data to build the models that AI and ML are bringing, right? And then the veracity. That's just the data quality and the accuracy of the data. But the energy sector deals with vast amounts of data, right? So we want it to be good because we have sensitive data. Grid information, we've talked about customer data, we've talked about operational details. So the barrier is the data coming in, but then we've talked about the infrastructure, right? Some of our legacy infrastructure may not be equipped to collect that data. So Kevin will talk about that in the easy metering. We'll let him talk about that. But what about the second barrier would be the infrastructure. So are the meters out there collecting the data, right? Do we have the smart meters out there collecting? Are they collecting the right data? So even though they can do it, when we put them in there, did we equip them to bring in that data? When I say bring in the data, where are we bringing it in, right? So where are we landing the data, all the buzzwords, data lakes, data lake house, whatever you call it. Is there a central repository infrastructure in-house, in wherever it is, landed that is providing that single source of truth, right? Who's saying that data is right? So is the data infrastructure in place for the utility to make the decisions that they need to on the data? Do people trust that data? So the third thing, and I've said it probably 3 times, is the people, right? So now we have the quality of the data. We have the data infrastructure. Is it coming in? Is there a single source of truth? And do I have the people in the organization around that data? And what does it mean for an organization to be data-driven, right? In my mind, you have to have at the enterprise a strategy, right? Then the people and the culture supports the data strategy. Then the metrics, whatever we want to call them, KPIs, the metrics. But are we looking at each business unit has to be looking at the data and the metrics that support the overall strategy of the enterprise, the utility, the organization, and then the data management. So again, it's around the data quality, but once I bring it in and it's in-house and it's in that thing, who are the stewards of the data? So we call it data governance, data management, whatever you want to call it. Who's saying that, yes, that's the right data coming in at the right time and it looks good, right? And then the next pillar, if you will, tools and technology, right? So now we have, do my businesses have the tools they need to make those decisions, right? The last one, I call them analytics capabilities. Do I have the people with the skills needed to make those decisions, right? So I think, Scott, you touched on it, is what we're looking at now and how we're looking at it. It's not going to be the same even next year, right? So do my people have the skills they need to make the decisions? And so those are the pillars. So those are the three. So it was the data quality, the infrastructure in place, and then the organization to support that. So in my mind, those are the three barriers of wider adoption of AI and ML.